Welcome back to Nightcap Chat, the pop culture comics and gaming podcast. Today we're talking about our pop culture guilty pleasures, our favorite comic book story arcs, and superhero movies influencing their comic books. I'm Blade O'Neill.
I'm Ken Brown.
So, we brand ourselves as a pop culture podcast. It's kind of all-encompassing to comics and video games and Star Wars and all kinds of different fandoms. And so I was thinking the other day, we have guilty pleasures.
Yes.
When it comes to things we're a fan of. And I thought it'd be kind of fun to maybe talk about, what some of those things are. So what do you got?
Oh man, my favorite's the black symbiote Spider-Man.
But is that a guilty pleasure? because that's just cool no matter how you look at it, I think.
Would Madden NFL be a guilty pleasure?
I don't know, maybe.
Because I said too, that it's the same game every single freaking year. Football doesn't change.
So is Call of Duty, but the players do, right?
The what?
The players do.
That's true. That's the thing too. Is that I need to have the rookies so I can build my own franchise from the start. You know what I mean? And each year you get super excited about that. Okay, can I build a team that is more fun than what I see in the real NFL? And each year it gets harder and harder to do that because they keep on making the game more advanced. And then the whole thing too is, can you hack how to more or less beat the computer? Because the computer gets tougher every year too as well. And so I love playing the whole GM mode of it. I don't even just get in the gameplay. I want to build franchises. So it's kind of like a guilty...
you're a business owner, aren't you?
It's hilarious, dude. It's that. I want players that I'm not restricted to. That's what I love about Madden is you're not restricted to the rules of reality. That. You can't get the perfect team, but you can build a team that is players that you see are the best available.
Okay.
And that's to me a lot of fun is that. Yeah, you can have your regular roster and play the season, but then that's already preset. You know what that reality is. But how cool would it be if you had Matt Ryan on your team, or you have the gosh, dude, let me see.
Reality is what I ever want it to be.
Yes, exactly, dude. It's that. That. Okay, I still want David Johnson on my team as a Cardinal fan. And Larry Fitzgerald, yes, of course I'm going to want Larry Fitzgerald on my team. But if he's drafted before I have a chance to get him, then it's how high of a priority is it to have the players that I want on my team that I enjoy already, to the fact of the computer has them ranked a certain way. And so you always have to try to outthink the computer to try to build a team that you want. It's not that you get to pick your 32 players that you want as your dream team. Yeah. It's still a pseudo reality you have to play into.
Interesting. That sounds fun. And I get that. I don't play a lot of sports games, but back in the Dreamcast days,
yes,
there was a game called World Series Baseball 2K1.
Okay.
And me, my brother, and my dad, we had so much fun playing that. But even for the time, because this is when the Dreamcast was,
yes,
you could arrange the players and make trades, but the computer, I don't think could tell you no, because I made the Mets because I'm a New Yorker, and I had a ridiculous freaking lineup. It was pretty much just an all-star team that I made, but they also had custom characters, and you could make their stats whatever you want. So I made myself, and I was this bulky guy, and I had all the best stats, and I was my number 3 or number 4 hitter. But we had players A-Rod and whoever else at the time. Well, you see, we were Mets fans, so Jeter was not on our team.
That's a good point. I forgot about that. Yes.
So, he may have been really good, but I did not want him on my team.
No Yankees on our Mets team here.
That's right.
We're going to get Randy Johnson to keep him away from the Yankees.
That's right. They were the evil empire, but it was a lot of fun.
It's cool enough to be able to play the game as it's set up, but then when you can make the sports team your favorite type of team you want to make it, it's you have the whole freaking sandbox.
Yeah.
It's like Disney buying Marvel. They're not going to keep anything out of the sandbox anymore. They're going to mix whatever they need to into their universe. They can do that same thing with sports games. You kind of make your own universe to try to win your championships.
Yeah, no, absolutely. My father and my brother, to this day, they played this game called Stratomatic. Are you familiar with that?
No, what is Stratomatic?
It's a big East Coast thing. So Stratomatic is, I like to call it a baseball D&D.
Nice.
Because every year there's stat cards that are based on the previous year. So you roll dice, 20-sided dice, and based on their statistics from last year, you can draft your players. They're the cards, and like you make your own team. So you have like a league, and you're all like you're essentially the general manager, and you pick who you want on your team, and you play baseball with the
card
cards.
Games. That's awesome.
But it's all stat based. Okay. So you roll dice to see like, okay, like this is my lineup. Now this guy's batting, I roll this, and you see, do you get a hit? And it really, the best way to describe it is baseball D&D.
That is awesome.
Or you're the GM.
That makes so much sense why stats are such an important part of sports analysis now. We live in this era in sports now where everything is conducted based off of statistics rather than the human themselves.
Yeah.
What do they got a nickname for it inside of sports now. Oh my gosh, dude. It's funny.
Sports analysts?
Analytics is what they call it. Yeah, dude. Okay. Sports analytics is huge now in sports. And they look at more or less like they look at things so analytically where they look at windows of performance times. And then if they more or less match it more or less game for game performance of each player that's on the team. And then they look at the numbers of what is a good performance number they want to reach, and then the actual performance number. So when free agency or trades start to come into play, they'll look at more or less a point system too. If they bring this player in analytically, how much better is our team on that point system that we want to achieve versus, in the past be like, Barry Bonds, dude, that guy's the best player in baseball because he hit 73 home runs in one season. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's like, I think one of the terms they use in there is wins per replacement. And so how many wins are you going to get by replacing the players that are on your team versus someone on another team? Can this player bring in that many more wins than the team you already have?
Yeah.
I'm going, oh my gosh, dude, you guys like turn this into like algebraic equations.
It's a new nerdy take on sports.
It's the pop culture of sports. You know what I mean, dude? It's like that we all grew up with D&D and trying to do like, hey, how can we get the best player on our, the best player in your D&D game to accomplish as much as possible.
That's funny. It's a really interesting way of looking at it. And I think probably one of my biggest guilty pleasures is probably Pokemon.
Yes.
But I mean, I grew up with Pokemon, but like you said,
huge part of culture.
Oh yes. But like the people who were kids, when Pokemon first came out, like we're all adults now.
Yes.
And I think Pokemon was really smart that they're really catering toward not only the next generation of Pokemon fans, but they've done a really good job on catering to their adult crowds as well. Like the Pokemon Center website, like there's adult clothing and adult collectibles and things specifically directed for the adult collectors, which is great. And would have been stupid of Nintendo / the Pokemon Company to do anything otherwise. I mean, look at Detective Pikachu was an awesome movie. I mean, like I know you didn't see it, but I mean, like it was literally like
that great reviews everywhere I'm seeing on it.
As a fan, like there were so many things that were specifically like for fans, and there were so many references to the actual lore. I don't know if you want to call it the original video games or the old cartoons, but I mean it was awesome.
Nice.
Another big one. I mean, pop culture doesn't have to just be fandoms in general. I think sometimes it's certain characters that you like too. Like I really like Jabba the Hutt.
Yes.
I don't know. He's just an ugly slug. But he's a gangster. I mean, he ordered Boba Fett to go get, Han, who had, this crazy debt to him. And like, I like Jabba. I think he's awesome.
And one of my favorite guilty pleasures, I'm a big Alpha Flight fan.
Okay.
And like that, a lot of people go, Alpha Flight, dude. It's like that. What's the big deal about Alpha Flight? And I go, I don't know. Some of that story tells and those characters, nobody cares about them, but they were such great stories I read as a kid. I got invested in them. And just the designs of the costumes. I was a big John Byrne fan. And just something like every time that I see something with the character Guardian on it, it's like I have to pick it up. And Guardian, I guess, is the character that is, I guess, my guilty pleasure member of the team. Is like he's Iron Man and Spider-Man mixed into one character in my eyes, because he's got all the humility of Peter Parker, but all the intelligence of Tony Stark. Like he can build pretty much anything. He's like a brilliant engineer. And it's fun to see someone that's like more or less the humility of Peter Parker, but then all of the ingenious of Tony Stark. And just the character design looks it's a white costume with like a red maple leaf wrapped around it. And whatever it is, I think that costume design is super cool. And so every time I see it, it's like, oh, I got to get that. Yeah. And it's a stupid guilty pleasure. Like, just a really big fan of that character.
And Alpha Flight's is a really cool team. Like, there's a lot of cool characters and a lot of good mythology that contributes to Weapon X and departments K and H.
Underutilized for what it is.
Absolutely, and I think we've talked about it on previous podcasts. Like Alpha Flight would be a great jumping off point to start mutants within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, especially if you bring in that whole thing with experimentation and stuff.
Department H,
as even in the
next program,
the first time that Deadpool origins were discussed in the comics, he's talking with, I guess, the recruiter, if you will, and he talks about Vindicator was just the beginning, the first, since then what we cooked up is you'll see. But I mean, then you find the whole dark side of what Weapon X was doing, and he got put into the hospice, the Weapon X hospice, and they started a Deadpool in there because a lot of these experiments went wrong. But I mean, Vindicator was the beginning of that. Yep. You gotta give him some credit where credit's due.
And it's funny too, because like he had no intention of it going that direction. Like that,
really?
They just kind of I think the Vindicator, like what James McDonald Hudson, the Canadian government decommissioned Alpha Flight.
I see.
And it's like, so he more or less had to put together Alpha Flight. Actually, his wife put back together Alpha Flight after the Canadian government didn't have funding for Alpha Flight anymore. And I think some of those other people that were part of that Department H program did go on to do the Weapon X program of like their own experimentations.
Well, and who knows, what the intention was in the beginning, because I think it was later revealed that Mr. Sinister was behind
behind
the Weapon X program. It does make sense, but I'm sure that was an afterthought.
Yes. It's like, let's add in all these different elements that fit the onion. You know what I mean? And fit the onion, the core of hey, how can we peel this away to its rawest form and make it go forward with it? Because Mr. Sinister is like that. That is right up his alley, is the Weapon X program.
Yeah.
And like Apocalypse, going back to the fact of Apocalypse wanting some, mad scientist genius that Nathaniel Essex, who thought was like, no, dude, there's no such thing as evolution and so on and so forth. And genetic engineering was that next step in evolution in the original Mr. Sinister origin story. And Apocalypse said, hey, can you really accomplish what you're saying? Because I'll give you the power you need to do it. And he goes like, I have no doubt that I'm right. And then Mr. Sinister was born out of Nathaniel Essex.
What they could have been with Mr. Sinister is maybe in the movies, they wanted to have somebody who was a big deal behind, the Weapon X program. Is sort of like Stryker, like what? He's just a military guy, like in the grand scheme of mutants, people with claws and laser eyes. And, maybe that was the intention.
Yes. And then they just kind of went with that direction.
But before Marvel, was trying to screw with the Fox movies, and, I mean, I think I found out from, it's actually Chris Claremont, that they said, any X-Men creators like you, if you cannot make any new characters in X-Men books, because that gives film rights to the Fox movies. Yes. So that's why for a long period of time there was no new characters introduced within X-Men books.
Yes, that makes sense.
Up until now, until recently. We just got that Liefeld creation. Major X. But yeah, Chris Claremont said at that panel that there was no new character
creations
shut down
for the characters. That's interesting on that, because that makes a whole lot of sense of like, how are they going to, create new characters if the X-Men movies just take them right away and do whatever they want with them?
Well, and they were getting them. I mean, like, I think like the first appearance of Pixie, wasn't that like about 2005, I want to say, so. But so like creating that character, if that was an X book, like those movie rights immediately went to Fox.
It's crazy. It's almost like writing their stories for them. And then like Marvel's like, hey, we want this back, so we got to stop giving them more material to work with.
And then they went out of their way to cancel Fantastic Four, around that same time.
Gosh, because that that last movie went so far off the rails. I mean, as I said too, when you put Doctor Doom into the origin of the Fantastic Four, him getting the powers the same time they did, it's like there's no precedent for that anywhere that you can retrofit unless it's like an Ultimate story. And then in the Ultimates, they're already tying up that universe because they were, it's like, okay, we're kind of finishing off the Ultimate universe, not restarting it again type of thing.
That
so it was so far off balance that
especially
gotta stop it.
Especially at the time, it didn't really bother me as much because like we didn't really have like the superhero movie as we know it today. But I mean, it would have been a lot more interesting if that wasn't the case, But I mean, but now you run into this problem where how do you not accuse Dr. Doom of just being evil Iron Man when we just had, Ironmonger, we had more or less Crimson Dynamo, where how many evil Iron Mans are we going to do? I mean, I want to see something really convincing. Spoiler alert for Endgame. I don't know how many times we want to keep saying that or not. But maybe now that Tony Stark's dead, maybe they're going to do something with there now. Like maybe that's why Dr. Doom makes some armor. But I mean, like this whole thing, like his face gets messed up.
Yeah.
So I mean,
that's the thing too. Maybe that's the thing too. Is like Reed Richards and Victor Von Doom are still more or less close at the time, and they said, "Dude, this thing, Iron Man saved our universe, but now he's gone. What's going to be next?" And then where Reed and Victor Von Doom start planning to be that, as you said, a kind of protector of the universe now that Tony's gone in their minds.
Yeah.
And obviously something goes super wrong, and it's Victor Von Doom blames Reed Richards for what went wrong to become the new Doctor Doom, become Doctor Doom rather than the good guy that they were planning on being. So I don't know. Just something like that would be an interesting type of twist. Like, how are they going to bring in the Fantastic Four into the Marvel Cinematic Universe? And that would be kind of a fun, clever way to do with Doctor Doom that, has really nothing to do with the comic storytell, but something that they can include into their world of what they've already built with Endgame.
I saw this article. I believe I read it on comicbook.com that accused the new Mr. Fantastic looking like John Krasinski. Plays Jim in The Office.
Nice.
So, I mean, you almost wonder are the plans for Fantastic Four underway, and they're kind of, already starting to drop hints there. Because, I mean, if you look at the screenshot, if you pull it up, here's one on Geek Tyrant, it totally looks like John Krasinski, who plays Jim in The Office. I mean,
that's awesome.
Well, we've got a record, going on right now where it's almost too much where the movies are really dictating what's going on in the comics.
Yes. And that's kind of become a major, how would you say? It's like a contention between comic creators, some of them, and the freedom that they have of trying to create stories that they feel are more for comic fans, where they're being more or less influenced to, hey, this is what we're doing in the movies, make this work. And I know there's I hate to drop names, but like suppose I have read that Joe Quesada is not happy with that at Marvel.
I could see that.
Because he's a comic purist. Do you know what I mean? He started off as an indie creator doing stuff like Ash, and he helped to, create the Azrael Batman.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That's something like that. He's all about creating things that are legacies. And unfortunately, the Azrael Batman's a part of Batman history now, but it wasn't quite as successful as we all hoped it would be when he created it. And it was awesome when it happened. But, unfortunately, I don't know who was writing Batman at that time. I apologize. I'm not remembering who was writing Batman, but that story arc ended with more or less Azrael becoming the Punisher of Batman's rather than more or less.
I see.
Do you know what I mean? Like true Batman. And it kind of was like what happened with the symbiote Spider-Man. It's like that fans got kind of like, that's not our Batman, even though it's a good story transition that we're going in a different direction for the future of Batman. And this is what we're going to do. But the fans weren't, I don't think the fans were having any of that for the long term.
I mean, weren't you telling me that right now they're making Aquaman very Jason Momoa-esque, I believe?
Yeah, that's interesting too, because you clearly see it right there with the fact that the movie's influencing the DC Comics versions of these characters.
Which, I mean, I would argue now he's closer to Namor than Aquaman.
Yes, I know, ironically.
Like, what are we doing? I mean, Namor doesn't have tattoos, but Namor has dark hair.
Yes.
You know.
And that's what I think was ironic too as well. Like when I first saw that they announced Momoa's Aquaman, I'm going, dude, he would be the perfect Namor.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
absolutely.
More than I saw him as Aquaman.
Absolutely.
And, you know, it fits because I guess they're similar characters, but personality-wise, Momoa is such a BA personality.
Yep.
Where like Aquaman is kind of more of a type B personality. Do you know what I mean? Where he doesn't have to be the alpha male Aquaman. Yeah. And Jason Momoa clearly is an Aquaman alpha male. Yeah. And, you know, Aquaman was like, hey, I'm just support to the team. This guy could be the leader of the team at any moment. And I don't think there was any point in Justice League history where, hey, Aquaman, what do you think we should do? You know what I mean? Well, you know what? Let me go talk to the sharks and the whales, and we'll get this stuff taken care of because, the tidal waves, all we need to wash away Black Manta, and this is all done. It's like, you just don't, do you know what I mean?
I think they were setting that up, though, like in the New 52, though, a little bit, because I think when the New 52, like, first started showing Aquaman, like, they made him, like,
he was cooler.
Superman strong. And he's like, I'm going to, bring these sharks and like they're gonna mess stuff up and ruin your day.
Yeah, Jeff Johns did a really good job trying to rebuild that Aquaman. Now, maybe that was part of it too. Is like they wanted like, hey, we need Aquaman to be a little bit more important if we're going to join him in the Justice League. Maybe it was as far back as then. Yeah, because Jeff Johns has a lot to do with the DC cinematic universe. And
it was probably more subtle, but like it's really in your face now. You know what they're doing. I mean, also the some of the latest Captain Marvel comics.
Ironically, Jeff Johns is writing those right now too.
Really?
Yes, yeah. Jeff Johns is writing Shazam right now. Because about Shazam, Captain Marvel, or Captain Marvel?
Carol Danvers.
My apologies. I was thinking of Shazam.
Because they made her mother like she turned out she was Kree or part Kree.
Yeah, but then they didn't even. Marvel. I was thinking of Shazam. For a second
which Captain Marvel? Which of the Captain 30 Marvel? Captain Marvels?
So I was on Jeff Johns in my head. I'm going, oh, wait a minute.
But I think it was you also who told me like I didn't see that they actually retconned Marvel.
Yes,
to be a woman in that as well.
That was purely for the movie.
Absolutely.
Said too, there's so many things like that. Even Bendis retooling Guardians of the Galaxy, the way that Star-Lord looked.
Well, how about the way Star-Lord acts? Because as far as I'm aware, Star-Lord was not this
like Indiana Jones
Chris
type
Pratt character.
Yes.
You were like, right? Like he wasn't like that.
Yeah, they made him into like an Indiana Jones / Han Solo type of character really quickly for that movie purpose on that. So that's totally retooling for the movies on Guardians of the Galaxy.
I mean, you almost get away with it with, kind of like B and C characters. I mean, to an extent, like I'm sure there might have been people who might have, been upset, but, maybe it's for the best in the long run, in a situation like that.
Yes. And I said too, is like that, making things appeal to the mass audiences, I think is always their goal. And Joe Quesada kind of may not like some of it being so pushed in the direction of like, hey, this is where we're going. But the movie mass audience is bigger than the comic mass audience, unfortunately. I
mean, they're pulling in $1 billion a pop, right? Yes. I mean, is our comics pulling in that number, per issue or per month even?
Unfortunately, they're not. But I said too, is like that they need to keep the comic medium relevant.
Absolutely.
Because if they think they can just go more or less and do this stuff and write their movies based off the characters that's already been developed up to this point, and their ideas become better than the comic book ideas, that's where the problem comes to play. So you want the people that know the comic books to be able to write the plots that the comic book fans like.
Absolutely.
And then that way they're going to keep on seeing the movies, because if you cut that off, the head, despite the rest of the body, that's where you're going to start seeing the end of these stories start to happen, because they don't see the same pulse that the comic fans have. And the comic fans are always going to go see these movies. So you have to kind of have that little bit of marriage of, hey, we need to share the plots of what we're doing in these movies because it's not happening yet in comics. But you have a 2-year window that we're making this movie. Can you work this into storytelling right now? Because that way it sets the fact of, yes, it did happen in comics, and we're not so far off key like what Fox did with the X-Men all those years and the Fantastic Fours. Like, they didn't have that relationship with the comic book companies.
I mean, how necessary is it to go back and change certain things? I mean, these movies are drawing from from what, 70, 80 years of storytelling. And like, we're not going to run out anytime soon.
But if they see, it's kind of like what happened between the Walking Dead TV show and the Walking Dead comic. I see a very big parallel there, is because in the Walking Dead comic, they already have their source material, which is great for the Walking Dead TV show to happen.
Yeah.
But now they have the freedom to take that material and, hey, let's do things we didn't get the chance to do before because it's already done.
Mm-hmm.
And so now Walking Dead, the TV series, is strained very differently than the comic plot lines, but all the characters were there and have been part of the story with some other characters added in that have become huge following fans.
Well, they added Daryl into the comics after he was created for the
He's never been in the
show.
Comics to this day still.
What?
Yeah, Daryl's still not part of the Walking Dead comic storytelling. It's crazy. They teased it. They brought in Dwight rather than Daryl as one of Negan's saviors during when they first introduced Negan back in issue 97 or 98. That was the person that actually killed Abraham in the comics, was Dwight. And he had a crossbow in the shadows. And so everybody thought they're finally introducing Daryl into the comics. And it turned out to be Dwight for the person that was the new character they introduced. But that would be interesting. It's like, is there going to be a character that the Marvel movie cinematic universe creates that's brought into the comics?
They did.
Who was that?
Tessa Thompson's Valkyrie was recently added to the. But
that was in Exiles, though, wasn't it? Like an alternate reality thing.
I don't know where. I just read that they brought her particular Valkyrie into the comics.
I'm pretty sure she's in Exiles, because Exiles, it's the movie universe. Exiles is a fun book. Like that Exiles is where there is each member of the team's from a different universe.
Yes.
And the Valkyrie is brought from the cinematic universe into the comic.
Are you serious?
Yes, it's cool. That's the first time, if I'm pretty sure, like that. Double check me on positive on that, but that was the first cinematic movie character brought into comics via the Exiles.
Interesting.
So I thought it was pretty epic how they did that for the first time. And so it's still, she is, in that story, that's where they're supposed to pull the
very interesting.
Like she's that similar. She's the Valkyrie from the cinematic universe.
See, and that's why, like when you go into like the Marvel movies, I mean, you do want, them to adapt a story that and love, but we can't always expect it to be exactly like the comics. And what really helps ground me is like realize like this is an alternate reality.
Yes.
It's not going to be the same, but this is its own universe. The comic still happens, and the comic still happens in their universe, but this isn't the 616 universe. It's
justified its own universe.
It's whatever.
Universe.
They actually have its own number for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't remember what it is. So that's interesting that that can happen, because one thing I read,
it was Spider-Ham. Spider-Ham was part of the Star Comics universe. You know what I mean? And the Marvel.
Yeah, that's so silly.
It's still a Marvel Comics universe. Like DC's king for that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that, man, dude. Like technically, if they really want to do a super crossover DC, you have the CW shows team up with Smallville, team up with, do you know what I mean? The Superman, Christopher
I see
Reeve
what you're
universe.
saying. Yeah.
That's all part of what they used to call the 52. But so it's interesting to see like that. Of all the DC 52 universes, it would have been great if they actually stayed true to their theory.
Yeah.
Of like that. This is the Christopher Reeve Superman universe. This is the Batman Adventures universe. And the Batman Adventures universe is definitely part of the 52.
Yeah.
They acknowledge that. But some of the different things they've done, is this the George Reeves Superman universe? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is this the Adam West Batman? They do have Adam West Batman 66 comics too.
Do they?
That is technically, they can access that as part of the DC multiverse anytime they want.
Interesting. DC, probably had one of the earliest examples of any of their media influencing their comics with Harley Quinn.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Harley Quinn was developed by Paul Dini and Bruce Timm. And then that was definitely something that was part of the Batman animated series exclusively.
Yep.
And if you even want to go further back than that, too, Spider-Man's Amazing Friends, Firestar was created
no kidding. I did not know that.
Yes. Yeah, they wanted a fire and ice element.
Interesting.
And, so Jean Grey was dead at the time in the comics.
Yeah, of course.
And so that they had the whole thing where like Firestar, they kind of retrofitted into the cartoon that she was a member of the X-Men with Iceman.
Huh.
And they kind of graduated out with a new class coming in. That was like the Thunderbird and the Storm and the Wolverine and Nightcrawler.
Yeah.
And they just teamed up with Spider-Man to be Spider-Man's amazing friends after
I
that.
did not realize that.
Yeah, so Firestar didn't appear in the X-Men until after that series was canceled back in X-Men number 193. Back in 1985. And so the series was canceled back in, I think, 1981, 82. And so it's kind of interesting, like that character was kind of dormant there. And they decided, let's bring her into the comics now because a lot of people requested, where's Firestar?
Yeah. Well, DC probably, did it better because, look at Harley Quinn is just as popular as Batman and Spider-Man,
Well, connected her to the Joker was, I said too, was brilliant because Joker's the number one Batman villain in a lot of people's mind, and to have someone that's a sidekick to the Joker, just like Batman to Robin, it's a perfect fit for Joker to have his tormentor to be, his ally sidekick to kind of mess with Batman in that same way in the cartoon, and it just translated so well into the comic series of Harley Quinn kind of growing in her own direction. That they had the freedom to tell more backstory that they couldn't do in the cartoon for Harley, where, making, Joker into a non-caring kind of an abusive boyfriend type of personality, where the allies, Poison Ivy and Catwoman, inside of the comics started more or less, hey, you need to break away from this. This is abusive. You know what I mean? Like psychologically.
Yeah.
And it's ironic, too, because Harley Quinn was a psychologist herself. That's really why she did see it in their storytelling. But it was really fun to see Harley Quinn become her own character and become one of the, I guess, what you could say, foundations of the DC universes now.
Yeah, going forward, absolutely. Wasn't the whole idea of the Ultimate Universe established because of movies? Like, wasn't it there to try to make, establish like this new canon and, have stories that work more cinematically? I thought it
feels that way. The original concept that they had with the Ultimate Universe back in the early 2000s was they wanted it to be something where it was accessible for new readers, because they already had, 1962 is when Spider-Man was created. 1961 was when Fantastic Four was created.
Yeah.
There was a big disconnect Marvel felt with the audience because they just came out of their bankruptcy period. And they said, what can we do to pull in new readers? It's like, well, let's kind of retell the stories from a modern perspective. Yeah. Because there's no more space race. There's no more nuclear scare. There's no more fear of what radiation can do to you.
Yeah, because that was like the catalyst for like almost every superpower. If it wasn't radiation, it was,
exactly
mutation.
And if you look really closely at what was going on with the Ultimate Universe, it was genetic engineering and modern science and the Ultimate Fantastic Four. Yeah. In the whole thing with Spider-Man, it was, Oscorp and their genetic engineering.
Yeah, and they made Venom in a lab, right?
Yes, and I said too, that was interesting too, because that was at a college university that the Ultimate Venom was created by Peter Parker and Eddie Brock's parents, and it was supposed to be a cancer curing.
Yep, that's right. I remember that.
Like a antidote type of thing you put on your body, and it cleanses your body of any imperfections. Well, yes, it does. The theory, Brian Michael Bendis being the genius that he was, is like, okay, let's look at the science side of this. If it cures all the different things in your mind, it'll drive you crazy. And so certain things that are supposed to be balances in your body, kind of like antibiotics, you have to start eating yogurt afterwards, or else your immune system, do you know what I mean? It kills everything that's bad in your body. But then if you don't put the good bacteria back into your system, it's harmful to you.
Interesting.
And so the whole Venom thing they had, unfortunately, the Brock and, Mr. Parker and Mr. Brock had to put it in further research. And then obviously they had the whole disappearance of Peter Parker, and I'm not sure what they had happen with Eddie Brock's dad. Yeah. But that kind of just became a dormant part of history that Eddie Brock shared with Peter Parker in the Ultimate Universe, and they went to discover it. And Peter Parker so fascinated, he went back in there by himself and, put the suit on. And that became the whole story of like Eddie Brock getting mad at Peter because, dude, this is our inheritance, not just your inheritance.
And was this the first time that we had organic web shooters? Was it in the Ultimate comics, or did
It was in the original, the symbiote, the first one.
No. I mean, when Peter Parker was bitten by a spider in the Ultimate Universe, doesn't he have organic web shooters or no?
I think that was from the Ultimate Universe for the first time, the organic web shooters.
Now, I'm trying to remember when that came out. Did that predate the Tobey Maguire?
No, go back on that. That wasn't. That was the movie influenced the organic web shooters.
Interesting. So it did. So once again, the movies have influenced the comics.
Did a story there where Paul Jenkins and Humberto Ramos did a story in Spectacular Spider-Man where Spider-Man got bit by the spider avatar lady. And he went into Cocoon and he came out with new powers, including the organic.
Oh, so that was in 616, not in the Ultimate Universe.
Yes. And then also afterwards, they did another story because people thought that story was kind of lame. Mm-hmm. Remember The Other?
I do not.
Okay, there was a storyline that J. Michael Straczynski wrote with it was a crossover that crossed over into the 3 titles of Marvel Knights Spider-Man and Sensational Spider-Man at the time, called The Other, where there was man, dude, I'm trying to remember the name of the villain, but something attacked Spider-Man, seemed to kill him, put him into a cocoon, and the same thing, similar type of thing. He came out with new abilities, including the organic web shooters.
Okay.
And gosh, dude, now I got to reread The Other now again. But it was J. Michael Straczynski was towards the middle of his run, and after that was over, he had the organic spider, and he also had the claw talons. Remember that for a short period of time?
That's right.
And that was retrofitted.
That was short-lived, right?
It was. Yeah, it was retrofitted after Big Time.
Okay.
Because not Big Time, it was retrofitted during the One Moment in Time, Brand New Day, when they did the whole thing where Aunt May got shot during Civil War.
Okay.
And they had to try to find a way to cure Aunt May, and there was no way to do it, so they made the deal with Mephisto that erased the marriage between him and Mary Jane. Yeah. So when he woke up that next day, it was as those events never took place, and Peter Parker had the regular web shooters again. Yeah. And I think that was obviously because in the movies they decided to go a different direction at Sony with making Andrew Garfield the new Spider-Man, and the Tobey Maguire era was kind of at an end, so they kind of retrofitted Spider-Man to be Spider-Man again. I could see that's probably why Joe Quesada doesn't like the movies influencing the comics, because you have to write these stories, you have to retrofit again. If someone like Sony just goes back and says, yeah, let's forget that whole Tobey Maguire organic web shooter idea, because Andrew Garfield had regular web shooters, right? Yes. And so they kind of said, we can't just go with what the movies are telling us to do, because if it flops, that's now our continuity. Yeah, well, almost everything is back home, if you will, now. So why do we even need to? I mean, sure, there are things you need to change to adapt it to a movie, but why do you have to change it in the comic? Write the comics for the comics, write the movies for the movies. If you want to make new stories, that's cool. Exactly. I mean, Marvel getting Angela I think that's kind of exciting. Yes. I think it would be awesome to see Angela. I mean, I want to see her pop up in the movies, but I mean, Hela was her sister that was cast out. I mean, are we going to do the same thing? No, that's true. Yeah, how are they going to do this on that with her?
Or is this something Odin keeps doing? Is hiding all of Thor's?
Well, they introduced the Angel Realm as where Angela was adopted.
Yep. No, I know that,
which is pretty cool to see that. I love to see that Angela story of her being brought down from her Angel Realm.
Well, she was part of the Asgardians of the Galaxy now, wasn't she? Yes. So, I mean, they kind of alluded to the Asgardians of the Galaxy, at the end of Endgame there. So I was just wondering, if Thor is going to run around with, this, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Guardians of the Galaxy, I wonder, are we not only setting up Beta Ray Bill, but are we also setting up Angela?
Yes, I'd love to see that, because I know that they're talking about eventually bringing Angela into the movies, and that would be the perfect way of doing it. And as I said, too, was Beta Ray Bill, and who's Adam Warlock, the other rumor?
Well, I mean, they showed his cocoon at the end of the last one, so I'd be surprised if Adam Warlock's not the bad guy in this one. Yeah, it's like that, figuring out like that. There's going to be some more people from these realms they'll keep on bringing in, especially with
War of the Realms going on in the comics right now because all the realms were destroyed by Malekith, the Dark Elf, and they all teamed up together.
Which is, I was really surprised that they chose Malekith for this because, I mean, the Dark World, isn't highly regarded, as a Marvel film. I don't think it was as bad as some people say, but I mean, I would almost feel like they'd want to forget about Malekith, but they brought him to the forefront, which I was really surprised. Yes. So I don't know if they're planning on bringing him back somehow. Or
maybe excited. Jason Aaron loves that character. You can tell by the way that story is written. Mm-hmm. So I'm going, wow, it's like Malekith is like something that Jason Aaron's writing Thor right now, and he's been setting up Malekith as the major villain inside of Thor for about the past year now. And it's interesting to see, like as you said, why did they choose that direction? It's kind of like the same thing too. Donny Cates making Punisher into the Cosmic Ghost Rider. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, okay, at first you're going, that's left field. But then if they continue to write the story, it's like that. Oh, I see. There's the origin of it. That's why they chose Frank Castle. Because he's got the strongest will of any non-mutant human on the earth. And being the last survivor, he's got this chip on his shoulder because he's called the Punisher. He punishes everything that deserves being punished. And in this case, Thanos was that person that needed to be punished.
Yeah.
So
we just finished up season 2 of the Punisher, and oh my gosh, it was so good.
It's awesome. I mean, talk about a guy that fits being the Frank Castle that is nothing like the comic Frank Castle, but so enjoyable. I mean, I don't know if it's the John Barenthal aspect of it or the fact of like that Frank Castle is humanized more than any time I've ever seen him in the comics.
But I think it totally works, because I mean, like, but it's not wrong.
I think it's great.
His whole motivation for this is like he is traumatized from having his family killed. So I mean, like, it totally works.
And he's protecting other people from experiencing the same thing he's experienced.
Exactly, and that's correct for as far as like his motivation for being the Punisher.
Yeah, and it's like, and he's doing it solo. Like Batman would, he's brought in Robins. Like that would have been like the perfect way at the end of that show to bring her in as a regular character, as a sidekick. That little girl that he saved through the whole movie. But he told her, "You get as far away from this life as possible."
Oh, this is Kelly.
This is on my shoulders, and I'm not going to bring you in. It's almost the anti-Batman move.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people compare Punisher to Batman, but Punisher uses guns and Batman doesn't. But like you could see once the way they wrote that series is he's got very Bruce Wayne type of care for kids and family. But since Punisher lost his family when he was an adult and Bruce Wayne lost his parents when he was a kid, they look at their viewpoint of keeping kids out of this life in different ways. Do you mean like Batman does as a father figure because he never had his father?
Yeah.
And Frank Castle's like that. I'm going to keep you out of this life as long as I can because I was a father.
Yep.
So it's kind of fun to see like that. That's one of my favorite things out of that Punisher season 2 is seeing how Frank Castle related to kids in that show.
Yeah, absolutely. And in more than one different way. It was not only with the girl he was protecting, but with the hitman that was going after him. Like, oh, you have 2 sons and you're trying to kill me to protect your children. Like, man, I would do that too.
Yes. Exactly,
I would kill you to protect my children.
Yes.
Absolutely. And oh man. Yeah. I mean, Punisher was between Punisher and Daredevil, like just Netflix are
so well done.
Yeah.
And I hope when it gets to Hulu or Disney Plus, wherever they decide to show it, that they keep that flavor that they've developed on the Netflix shows.
It's so dark. I'd imagine it going over to Hulu, especially when they're kind of setting up Hulu with shows like Ghost Rider and Hellstrom. Hellstrom? Is that right?
Yeah, Damon Hellstrom.
So, I mean, it'll be interesting because like I could see those characters kind of playing together as well. So the Daredevil, show in particular, adapted a lot of, maybe nothing, specific, especially toward the end, but like a lot of great storylines, especially like the death of Elektra, all the stuff with the Kingpin, him, getting out of jail, getting all this support. It's always so much fun when the comic shows or movies, adapt, like these storylines. What are some of your favorite story arcs, from the comics, whether we've seen it, on movies or not?
I would love to see Kraven's Last Hunt
as
a adaptation to either film or to a TV series. And it's obvious because Spider-Man's always going to be on film. We may not see it on film, but it's such an eerie feel of watching more or less Kraven get one up on Spider-Man and that making it his ultimate hunt. And then making it even more is like that where it's Spider-Man's fall's not the objective of Kraven.
Yeah.
It's him replacing Spider-Man and then doing something Spider-Man's never done. And he went after Vermin.
Yeah.
And just more or less this totally innocent experiment that was just delegated to the sewer, just want to be left alone. And then Kraven goes down there as Spider-Man and just more or less demolishes the guy into like complete fear of like never wanting to ever come up out of the sewers ever again after that. And then when that's done, he goes back to his house and drinks some, more or less makes whiskey for himself, has his final drink, and then kills himself.
Would you, so, following those events, would you see that, if they adapted this as a movie, would you see them doing a Spider-Man movie with Kraven as the bad guy and then to adapt Kraven's Last Hunt, do a Kraven movie where it actually takes place from his perspective and kind of, killing Spider-Man in the beginning,
Dude, that would be
having
epic.
this twist, and then you have, Spider-Man's alive and okay at the end. Like, that might be cool.
That's something I think that would be great that Marvel kind of hinted at a little bit in Endgame where you got to see Thanos' perspective of how he was affected.
Sure, why not? And obviously that works, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And you could make him this tragic character, struggling with, does he start losing his powers? Is that kind of the deal in the beginning?
Kraven's just getting older. Do you know what I mean? It's like that he's accomplished everything in his hunt then except beating Spider-Man.
Because, you look at, Sony, like they made this Venom movie. We've got Morbius in production, which I feel we couldn't even necessarily need either of those, especially having Venom without Spider-Man first. I would love a Venom movie. Yes. Just I would like to see him, along with Spider-Man first. But I think, Kraven, especially with that story,
Dude, it's so dark, especially the whole thing of the hunt type of thing on it, where Spider-Man's spider sense is always going off. And then where, what's going on? And then Kraven gets some, with a tranquilizer. The best part about this story is that, Kraven's never been the killer inside of Spider-Man's eyes. He's just the hunter.
Yeah.
And he goes, "You're not going to kill me." Then all of a sudden you hear this crack. And it looks like right there that Kraven just like that, this is it. I'm finally taking you out permanently rather than just the sport. And so it's kind of going, oh my gosh, dude. Like you're thinking at the end of that first part of that story, Web of Spider-Man 31, that Kraven just killed Spider-Man. You know what I mean? What's this mean type of thing on it? And it's like that Spider-Man, you can't just kill Spider-Man, but that's the first time that they made you feel. I kind of compare it to Batman The Dark Knight Returns.
Okay.
Like that around that same time period, it was actually about a year later. I think it was 1986 when Batman The Dark Knight Returns came out. Might even been around almost exactly the same time because I do remember this was out during the 25th anniversary era of Spider-Man. So it might have been Batman The Dark Knight Returns came out the year prior or the year of, because I think this was 1986, 87, if I remember correctly. So say what year that was in.
Yeah, I've got a little reference in front of me. I don't see a year.
Yeah, it was actually 87. So this did come out the year after Batman The Dark Knight Returns.
Interesting.
And so I think it was more or less Marvel's answer to the darkest Batman story that was ever told in Batman The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. We need to do something that is super, super dark that you would not expect happen in a Spider-Man story. And this was Kraven's Last Hunt.
And he's got the black suit, but this is
the cloth version.
Yes, that's exactly what I was about to ask.
Black Cat was a big fan of the suit, and so they gave him the cloth version of it.
Because there's no way that
he'd be wearing the symbiote.
No, there's no way that Kraven would stand a chance. Because I thought, when Spider-Man had the symbiote, he was probably like one of the most powerful superheroes, in the universe, probably.
Yeah, the symbiote suit was very dormant on what he could do during wearing Spider-Man. When Spider-Man was wearing it, but like once it became Venom, it was like he,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he was already shape-shifting with Spider-Man, but he had like more sense about himself, like more like his spider sense was stronger. Like it made him a stronger Spider-Man when he was wearing the suit, but he never tapped into the potential.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the suit wanted to alert him of what it really was.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially with someone as powerful. I mean, Spider-Man's actually a pretty powerful character.
Absolutely.
So I mean, imagine it made Eddie Brock this much, more powerful that he was, able to go toe to toe with Spider-Man. Imagine what it could perpetuate on somebody with the powers, of Peter Parker.
You could even argue that the suit absorbed some of the abilities off of Spider-Man.
Absolutely. And I think that it absolutely did. That's where it got the
web shooter ideas.
And
then, because I said too, like Eddie Brock is pretty much just a beefed up Spider-Man when he's Venom, with obviously more, the cloaking of devices that Spider-Man never really had.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But another one that I thought would be awesome too to see is Wolverine: Enemy of the State, the Mark Miller story where he was infiltrated by Hydra.
I'm not familiar with that.
And then he was more or less chopped up and reprogrammed because of his healing factor. He grew back together, but he was then all of a sudden programmed to hunt down heroes in the Marvel Universe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then it was pretty intense storytelling.
Yeah.
And Mark Miller and John Romita Jr. did the story on it, but it was
awesome.
Very, very intense storytelling.
Can't go wrong with that. We've got Dark Phoenix, coming up later this week. I'm still going to say, I want to see the Dark Phoenix saga adapted, to movies. The Dark Phoenix saga is such a great read, and just forget about the movies. If you haven't read the Dark Phoenix saga, it'll be not reminiscent, especially of The Last Stand. And then we've talked about it before, everything with the Hellfire Club. One of my favorite characters of all time, Dazzler. She's a small part, within that, but it'd be cool to introduce Dazzler, within there as well.
The Dark Phoenix saga would be amazing if they would do that. Do the whole Hellfire Club element of it. And just, as I said too, is, oh my gosh, dude, there's so many things that happen. That Dazzler issue you're talking about, where they're just going out to the club and Dazzler's the bar,
just singing,
just a bar singer, lounge singer. And I'm kind of going, how cool is this to all of a sudden have this fight happen between the X-Men and the Hellfire Club at the club where Dazzler is just performing, and it was just it was so much fun seeing that. And just the Jean Grey meeting Emma Frost, and Emma Frost thinking she's the most BA telepath, and Jean Grey just owns her with the Phoenix Force and almost oh my gosh, petrifies Emma Frost of that. What am I dealing with here? And it was so much cool stuff. The whole thing too, Wolverine getting defeated for the first time, and then coming back with more or less Wolverine solo going against the Hellfire Club by himself after they were all captured. The X-Men were captured. There's so many good stories.
So yeah, Chris Claremont just freaking killed it. My other favorite, or my absolute favorite, is of course Infinity Gauntlet. We won't go into that. We've talked about Infinity Gauntlet 1,000 times, but I will always talk about the Infinity Gauntlet. It's probably my favorite story arc of all time.
Another thing that would be fun too. Do you ever see read Acts of Vengeance?
Acts of Vengeance.
Yeah, that was a late 80s, early 90s. I think it was late 80s actually, storyline where Magneto and kind of an Illuminati of villains got together and said, let's switch it up. I'll tack the Avengers, you tack the X-Men, and all the villains kind of switched their dance partners.
No, I did not.
Oh my gosh, it was so much fun.
I gotta read that. That sounds like fun. Yes. I have this random comic, and I read part of it. I'm not really sure what it was. Magneto got summoned by the Hellfire Club, and they're like, hey, we want you to join us. And he was like, no.
Yes. Well, I can't remember who talked him into it. I think Professor X was up in space with Lilandra for a while.
Okay.
And Magneto was running the X-Men as penance for what he did in the whole nuclear sub court trial. And Professor X said, no, don't execute him. I'm going to make it. I'll take care of him. He's going to lead mutants to be good.
Okay.
And that's going to be his punishment. And then they more or less in the courts of the court decision was, all right, Professor X, you're in charge of the fate of Magneto because he's one of your own.
Okay.
And so what Professor X did, he ended up going up into space with Lilandra and told Magneto to lead the X-Men.
Huh.
Or the New Mutants, more or less. Because the X-Men were missing at that point after the whole Inferno thing.
Yeah.
Where they were brought into a different dimension. I think it was Fall of the Mutants, actually. It was after where they were defeated and you thought the X-Men were dead, the original X-Men. So Magneto was leading the next generation of X-Men. And the Hellfire Club approached him about being the White King.
Yep.
And he became the White King for a while, and then eventually broke away from being part of the Hellfire Club because he saw how corrupt it was.
I gotta read more of those. It was another, I don't know if you call it an arc or, because it was kind of its own, self-contained, miniseries, but the NYX stuff that introduced X-23.
That's a super
into
good
the comics, and it's really interesting, and it's very adaptable. I mean, it's a really dark story, but
street level mutants,
street level, and just cinematically, like it's not too crazy. I mean, like there's the girl who like kind of like, I don't know if it's not like stopping time, but like she exists. I mean, it's kind of stopping time. You know, I mean, there's those powers, but I mean, it's all mutants.
Yes.
And especially like, I mean, we did introduce, X-23 already, but not within the Marvel, cinematic universe. But I mean, there's some really dark topics that I'm not even going to say, on here, because I don't want to mark this as explicit. But I mean, just to introduce X-23, especially, as kind of, especially if this comes after having Wolverine around, for a while.
That would be an amazing type of thing. I said too, very street level. When I read that series, I almost thought about like that. These are the mutants Professor X doesn't pop up on the radar. And I wonder if that's just because Professor X thinks they're too lost of souls or just too, I don't know. I don't understand. I don't say too lost of souls.
Well, how many mutants are there? Is he going to be, he's not going to be able to grab everyone. He doesn't have room for the entire world. I mean, there's mutants everywhere.
It's like they're the ones that fall between the cracks.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. And that's going to happen, especially with how many mutants there are. Running around.
That's a great story to tell too, is like what happens to the mutants that don't get discovered by, Professor X or the Hellfire Club, or do they go down the path of darkness, or they go down the path of goodness? And is that almost like the Morlocks in a way?
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? There's Morlocks that are
good
Morlocks.
There's all these stories
Morlocks
that they can draw from, because like these things are happening, everywhere.
Yes.
And I think there's speculation that there was speculation that part of the New Mutants reshoots was going to integrate X-23 into the story from that girl who played her I almost called it Old Man Logan. In Logan.
Yes, that'd be interesting.
I think that would be interesting.
That would be super interesting, because that's the thing too, is ironic. They're going up through Canada. I was thinking they were starting up the Department H program up there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I was going, oh wow, this is starting the whole Weapon X program type of thing, but it's not, because that's in the future. So it was kind of like that. Are they starting their own version of,
well, if they're going through Canada, X-23 in the Logan movie just had the bone claws, right? So she has actually been experimented on.
Yeah.
So did she have metal claws?
I want to say that did she? I don't think she did.
I don't even remember now, because I only saw, it was so depressing. I only watched it once.
Yeah.
But she did an incredible job. Like that actress, she was awesome.
Yes, I said too. Like, I can't wait to see where she goes as an actress down the road too, because she's going to get older. And are they going to bring her in as a different character down the line?
I wouldn't even, especially, I believe X-23 was introduced in X-Men Evolution cartoon. She was later brought
that's another character
into the comics. Yeah,
she was cartoon first.
So why can't we use it? I mean, she was so young. I mean, X-23 is a little older in the comics now. I wouldn't even have a problem with them bringing this X-23 into the Marvel Cinematic Universe and have her actually be from the Fox universe, because X-23, that's how that originally happened in the cartoon, I believe. She was from an alternate future where they were trying to clone Wolverine. So I think X-23 was actually from another, if I remember it correctly.
That'd be kind of cool,
because there was actually a bunch of them.
Yeah, that's a good point too, by them using the portals to open up the multiverse. As I said too, you can pull these different incarnations of these characters into your main Marvel Cinematic Universe, and people would be fine with that.
Sure, yeah, why not? So we're just days away, and we're gonna see if Dark Phoenix the movie adapts from the Dark Phoenix storyline, if anything. Besides Jean Grey receiving the Phoenix Force in space.
Yes, you see a little bit. It's almost like they're mixing a little bit of the whole Kitty Pryde side of that story, where they're both fighting for recruitment. Like that Jean goes to join Magneto. It looks like she's betrayed by Professor X in her mind. That's what I was kind of getting out of the trailer there. What'd you get out of the trailer?
One part of us, like I thought she said, like, you're here to stop me. And he's like, that's right. Cause he walks in with this train, and she rips his helmet into pieces. Well, she squeezes the helmet on his head, and she's crushing Magneto's head. And then she rips it off and injects him with shards of the helmet. So she messes up Magneto.
It's insane to think about some
which
stuff.
is cool. I mean, it shows how insanely powerful she is, and she is. Dark Phoenix is one of the most powerful villains in the Marvel universe.
Absolutely. I said too, it was like there's a reason why the Shi'ar Empire had to have the trial on their planet because she was devouring planets, not just one planet, but multiple planets.
And if they're not in it, like it's so incredibly disappointing.
That would be epic way to solve this movie is, as I said too, that just that heroic death at the end of her like taking her own life to say that, it's the only way I could get rid of this thing. And it was funny too, because back then you didn't know that the Phoenix Force was actually the Jean Grey entity at that point, and that Jean Grey was a cocoon. The real Jean Grey was a cocoon in the bottom.
That came much later, right?
Yes, so it's interesting. Like when they're first doing that, they retrofitted that obviously later, but it was almost like the human side of Jean Grey said, I can't be a vessel for this thing anymore, and I have to destroy myself. And seeing Scott try, no, there's got to be another way, and that was the rewrite of the ending, because in the original Chris Claremont, John Byrne, have you ever read Phoenix, the Untold Story?
Is that the White Phoenix one?
No, it was a one shot that came out. That was the original script for X-Men number 137.
Oh.
And Jim Shooter said, the editor in chief said, no, dude, she freaking devoured planets. The Shi'ar Empire. She's got, you can't just have the original ending as they wrote it was that the X-Men finally surrendered. And then what the Shi'ar Empire did is they stripped her of the Phoenix Force.
Interesting.
She was just Jean Grey at the end.
Yeah.
She had no powers at all. And
not even her regular
telekinesis after that. They just totally they technologically stripped her of any supernatural ability that she had. Yeah. And then Jim Shooter, at the end, the next issue, number 138's cover was supposed to be just Scott and Jean, Scott quitting the X-Men, and Scott and Jean just going on and living their life together.
Huh.
And so like Jim Shooter said, like, no, dude, that's not gonna fly.
Yeah.
And
I mean, Jean,
like
she's a core X-Men character. He's kind of like, oh, nope, you're not Jean. You're not even Jean Grey anymore.
Yeah.
Forget about Phoenix.
You're Jean Grey, but you're just Jean Grey the human. And so it's kind of like the whole Madeline Pryor type of thing. You can see Claremont kind of re-injected that a little bit by having Madeline Pryor be the human person that eventually convinced Scott to leave the X-Men. And you all saw later that was Mr. Sinister plan he had to try to create the perfect mutant.
See, this is why we need Mr. Sinister in the movies.
And it's like Claremont's got, so I don't know how far ahead Claremont thinks as he's writing this stuff, but it amazes me how he connects his own Lego pieces as he goes.
I was telling you, I think it was last week's episode when Chris Claremont was talking to my wife, like he had the end of the world. He had it that far planned.
See, that's
he was telling us that whole story. And also like, he's a writer. He has an imagination. Like he's thinking like, okay, I'm going to do this and this and this and this. And like, he's a creative genius.
Yes. And that's like the whole build up type of thing too, is like that. How much did Jim Shooter take him off the rails by having him rewrite that ending that they had for that? There was a reason why he kept Jean Grey alive, obviously. And then with that, is that where Madeline Pryor came in to replace Jean Grey because that was part of his story? And it was just, it was with the Phoenix Force re-manifest itself because Madeline Pryor had the Phoenix Force because the clone thing that they did when he wrote that in almost, I wonder if that was his plan after, okay, you know what? The Phoenix Force is free from Jean Grey. Mr. Sinister, this guy that created a clone of Jean Grey, the Phoenix Force raced around the universe trying to find what happened to Jean Grey. Yeah. And that was because it was supposedly the Cocoon in the Bay type of thing. But the Force, Claremont retrofitted when Mr. Sinister created this clone of Jean Grey off of more or less genetic samples he had of her, that the Phoenix Force went to her. And I thought, oh my gosh, dude, how freaking awesome was this type of thing as this all plays out as a reader when you're reading this about how many layers this built up to way back from like 1980 going all the way to 1989, a 9-year run. Actually, even further back, if you're going back to the whole Phoenix saga, going back to X-Men number 100 and 101 back in 1976.
First Phoenix.
Yeah, it's an 11-year run of solving the Phoenix saga. And then sure enough, dude, Jean Grey, when she comes back again, eventually the Phoenix Force chooses her again during the Grant Morrison run. And it was just so well done as like that the Phoenix Force was meant for Jean Grey because it did build that that love relationship, almost going back that whole symbiote Peter Parker thing, that it was a symbiotic relationship between Jean Grey and the Phoenix Force.
She's the perfect vessel for it.
Yes.
Oh, well, we'll see how many layers this new Fox Dark Phoenix movie has here.
If it touches on that, I'd be amazed. I'd be, oh my gosh.
We'll see what it actually touches on from the comics, at all.
Yes.
Or is this just closure to the Fox universe?
Is it a force of nature that she runs into, or is it something that's just manifesting out of her own abilities?
Well, it looked like it was a force of nature thing from the because it looks like it's behind the people stuck in space, and it literally goes into her.
Okay.
You know, and Jessica Chastain's character talks about the Phoenix Force, blah, 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 did all these things until you.
Yes, that you stopped it for the first time.
So, I mean, we'll see. And we're going to talk a little bit about that next week after we see probably the Dark Phoenix movie here.
Looking forward to it, because I said too, it's like that. I can't wait to see if they can get this right as their farewell to the X-Men universe.
But either way, it's the end of an era.
Yes.
The Fox X-Men movies. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you all for listening. You know, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will catch you all next week.
Thank you for listening.